So, for example, a kid that has suffered trauma for the first 6-7 years of his life, he's witnessed a lot of physical abuse and drug dealers coming and going, or whatever. Very dangerous. Hippocampus, the smoke detector of your brain, becomes super sensitive. When you put a smoke detector in the kitchen, you cook toast and it goes off. There's no fire, but the smoke detector is going off anyway. That's the same thing that happens to you neurologically.
And that's if
you've suffered trauma, if you've
at what age?
At developmental ages. Well, at any age really. No, but it can happen to returned war veterans.
But you were saying in particular at this stage, how old the development?
Oh, so your brain grows from the age of 1 to 3. It grows from 300 grams to about 1,100 grams. From 3 to 26, it only adds another 400 grams on top of that. So those first 3 years of development are huge in terms of your brain development, your brain mass. So if you've suffered trauma during those years, with good reason, your brain gets really sensitive to dangers. And if you're let's say you've got a particularly large male worker who's been assigned to you, you're a young offender, you keep stealing things, you keep getting into fights, and you have a very large worker that's approaching you, you will have a certain amount of anxiety because your brain is telling you this is a dangerous situation. This looks like what used to happen. A much larger male would come and beat me or beat my mum or, and then they're not cognitive memories. That's now neurological wiring that just happens. In the same way that when we see a shark in the water, we freak out because it's dangerous. They believe that that's dangerous. It's not, but it's a social worker.
But that's something that's happened to you between the ages of 1 to 3 or something. And
So during those early formative years, it's particularly damaging, but it can happen at any age. It can happen into your adulthood.
So when you talk about neurological wiring, so let's say it goes 1 to 3, that could have happened. Something could have happened to you then something could have happened to you 3 to 12, and you don't necessarily have to even be aware of it.
No, not at all.
It's for that. Neurological
it's a pathway.
Part. So if you grow up which would be very prevalent in these situations, you grow up in a situation where your father's abusive, beats the shit out of your mum, or your mum's abusive. So your dad beats the shit out of your mum then beats the shit out of you, or I don't know, swears at you, or the way she interacts with you is abusive and blah, 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 blah. From 1 to, say, 12, there'd be varying stages of this neurological wiring?
Yeah, there would. Yes.
I'm not trying to paraphrase. I'm just trying to understand for me.
Yeah, sure. They are. They may or may not be significant, those changes. So you might see very similar behaviours from a 50-year-old returned war veteran from Afghanistan than you would in a 20-year-old young person that suffered trauma in their development. So it's all very case by case. The reality is we don't know, we know a lot about the brain, but there's more that we don't know than we do. But what we can say is that excessive amounts of exposure to trauma changes the shape of your brain in ways that it takes a long way to unchange. Do you know what I mean? And that's just neurology. Now, if it's very difficult to take a purely cognitive behavioural approach to someone with where neural pathways are hardwired because they're not aware of what they're thinking. You can say they're not dangerous and they might have an ideology that this big social worker is not dangerous, but that's not what your brain says.
Does that have a link to prejudice and racism and stuff like that? Because sometimes people are naturally afraid of someone because of their skin colour, but that's not a reflection of that individual or whatever. They could be the
really nice,
whatever.
Yep, but that's dangerous. It's different. I don't know what's happening. That's strange to me.
Yeah, but I think as well, some people have an intimidating. No, but some people do have an intimidating face, or they don't know. They don't even realise that they do. You know what I mean?
Or has that face been embedded in them psychologically to be scary because they might have watched a horror movie when they were a kid, and that scary face is in their head. So when they see someone with a weirder shaped nose, that's a trigger.
They go into.
But there's also a thing if you walk around doing frowning and shit that's saying to people, don't approach me.
That's
you know
right.
What I mean?
Yes,
certainly saying that.
Yeah.
One of the things at the centre that I'm working at now, that I'm working on with youth officers, is making a clear distinction between being friendly but not being a friend. So you need a friendly disposition, but you certainly can't be their friend. That's a different kettle of fish. That does a lot more damage than good. But being friendly is body language. It's the way your face is. You know what I mean? It's the way you approach. It's the way you walk. You know, are you holding a weapon or not? Not too far.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Just with that too, it's interesting too, because like I've gone through a lot of recruitment and stuff at the moment too, and naturally it's one of the things I've been challenged with is like being in a panel and just taking stuff neutral as it comes in. And part of cognitive behavior is when you meet someone is you're coming in with no preconceptions. That's really hard to do.
Very hard. Yes. It's funny you say that last week or the week before or something. So I'm also working with assistant managers, middle management, people who supervise offenders. And that's one of the things we're working on is being aware of your own bias. I don't like this particular worker because I think they're too soft.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And they might not be, but that's what I think. And so I'll manage them differently. Or I'll be harsher, or, you know, and I'm not getting the best out of them because, you know, but that needs, you need a serious amount of self-awareness to be a good manager. And that's all CBT stuff as well.
Yeah, because some of the trainings I've had around that, and I've tried to teach my staff, is sometimes when they're communicating with a fellow staff member, that whether you like it or not, you've just brought in all your energy and all the stuff you felt prior to that meeting.
That's right.
And it's completely unrelated. So if you are angry about this other thing and you've brought that into this new conversation, you're angry. That's what Fab was saying around, you have that angry face. So that person on the other side of the table still sees you have that angry face. So they're going to react that way.
That's right.
And they've brought that into the conversation that wasn't there before.
Yeah, exactly right. I don't use it anymore because it's inherently criminal, but I have used it a couple of times. It was a clip out of The Godfather with clients who would walk into situations and try and dominate situations physically or with their body language because they need to be in control.
Is that cognitively or just
behaviourally?
Just
well.
behaviourally.
It was both. It was both. I need to be,
because there's a difference doing it consciously. I'm coming here and I'm going to sit up that way. Yeah.
But when a conscious thought happens, so no one thinks about changing gears anymore. People that can drive manuals.
Yeah.
When a behaviour happens often enough, it becomes unconscious. So you know he'll walk into a party and feel like he has to be the man, and so he will very, very easily start a fight or provoke one, so that everyone knows he's the kingpin of the fight. So anyway, so I showed him this Godfather clip where there was what's his name? The actor?
Marlon Brando?
No, Al Pacino. He offered to buy out a casino, and the casino owner was
with Al Green.
That's it, with Al Green. You don't, Mo Green.
Yeah, Mo Green. Yeah.
You don't come in and talk to a man like Mo Green like that. And he was getting up and he was dropping racial slurs, and he was standing over him. And Al Pacino's character was just flatline. Calm as a cucumber, didn't make any rash decisions, didn't have to stand up, didn't have to throw a punch, didn't have to make a threat. And it was clear who was in control of that situation. It wasn't the one that was trying to assert power physically. It was the one who was calm and collected and could make rational decisions. And that therein is a model for anger management from a CBT perspective. And I really wish it wasn't a mob lord, because it's a really helpful clip.
Yeah.
But you know that you obviously, are you a fan? Or have you watched like all the Godfathers?
I'm a huge fan.
Have you read the book?
Yes, it's probably my favourite.
The book, like it's a crazy book, man. It's pretty good. And one of the things that's interesting, you know, talk about like neural pathways, and you talk about like cognitive behaviours and that. And if you see, like Michael Corleone, he was never going to be Godfather.
He was just the kid that was going to be.
That's it. And then when you look at that, and I know this is all fiction and whatnot, but then you look at that and you think like, how much of that is cognitive? Because, you know, when his father got shot and and then he kind of got forced into that life.
Yes.
And how much of that was like neural stuff that he would have subconsciously picked up. And the only difference was that instead of joining the mob, he joined the US Army.
Yeah, that's right.
And he got the same, because then when you read the book and you see how well structured like the mafia was, like with the capos and all the stuff, and like you think how was that cognitive or was that neural wiring?
Well, your cognitions will shape your neural wiring. So a good way to deal with trauma is to sort of make you aware of what you're thinking, but it just takes a long time and a lot of DBT principles and relaxation and all that sort of thing. But you can change the shape of your brain. It just might be harder than if I was going to change my choice of coffee. I could change my choice of, I've changed my choice of coffee by a fair trade, for example. I go, I don't want to drink that because, it tastes like oppression. So I don't drink that coffee. I like to drink the one that tastes like freedom and organic and all that sort of crap. Yeah. Now, that wasn't hard for me. Someone just had to give me a little bit of evidence and change my mind because nothing's too hardwired about coffee in my head. But for someone who does have some serious neural pathways laid down, it's much harder, If all of a sudden the gears were the wrong way around, you'd be starting in fifth gear a lot because that's the pathway. One is up here and then you go to two. But if you have to do it backwards, it's like riding left-handed, for example.
So when you talk about because the thing could you explain a little bit about the neural pathways and the cognitive development? Because I'm a little bit stuck. So neural pathways would the neural pathways would get wired earlier in life, or they get wired because of cognitive stuff, or can it happen either or?
It's easier for a neural pathway to get laid down earlier in life. If when you're hungry you do something about that, you cry, or as a child, or you ask mum or dad for a tub of yogurt or something, and you get it, you are never going to be anxious about food, right? That doesn't take very long. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, but if during those formative years you cry and nothing happens because you're hungry, you might become very anxious about food and about where it's going to come from. That only takes a couple of years or less, or much less. It only take a couple of months if you train a child to do that. It's a horrible thing to say, train a child to be anxious about food, but you know what I mean. Where that will take a lot longer with an adult because they can reason that trauma out. They can go, okay, I don't have access to food. How am I going to fix this? I've got to get a better job.
But as a parent, because you get all these different things where some parents will say, your baby's crying, don't give them the bottle straight away, or wait till they cry and then give it later. Isn't that?
Yeah, and that's very contentious. They've found, I've got 4 kids, so we looked into this a lot. My eldest wasn't the greatest sleeper. And they've found that cortisol levels remain irrespective, so called the stress hormone, remain irrespective of whether or not a baby's been picked up or comforted and they're crying or not, whether they're crying or not. So if you let them cry out, whether they're hungry or uncomfortable or they just want to be close, and they stop crying, if they stop crying because you've let them cry out, the cortisol levels are really high, and just as high as when they do crying. So it's not that they are calm and relaxed. They've just gone, crying's not working, but I'm still really worried and stressed out. And you know what? That makes sense. Because if you 2,000 years ago and you're left in a tent somewhere, you need to be close to your mum or you're going to get eaten by a wolf.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Will that have a long-lasting effect, like some people claim?
Possibly. I think empirically it's very difficult to tell. But yeah, quite possibly.
I see it for when kids get more into the 3-year-olds, where young kids who are in foster care and stuff like that, where that comes out strong.
Yes.
That you put them down and they eat up all the food within the first couple of seconds.
Right.
Because of that.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just that interesting part was when does those really stick for particular ages? Like this at a baby, they just need the nurturing as opposed to this. That's actually survival.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. If I'm not close to mum, I'm going to get killed. That's anxiety provoking, and rightfully so. And now if you try and force that out of them, I don't know. You're playing with some innate qualities to the human condition, I think, that